the French Revolution in the West Indies and the Napoleonic Wars. As a result, really, the Danish islands were really transformed, at least culturally, and I think politically too, liberalized. Between 1790 and 1800, the population of the port more than doubled, and this because of the influx primarily of French free coloreds and also Dutch free coloreds. For example, in 1790, the population was 27 and 37 person, 2,700. And in 1800, it was 6,361 estimated. So at that time, it really became an international port. I'm talking about Charlotte Amalia. I'm not talking about St. Croix or the plantations of St. Thomas or St. Croix. I'm talking about the port itself. In the process, the newcomers must have made a strong multi-ethnic mark on the culture of Charlotte Amalia. The native and Creole African slaves, being oppressed and confined and engaged mostly in menial occupations, could not be, and being in the lowest social class, could not be expected to make a big addition to or change in the culture. However, and the same can be said about the Europeans, who for the most part were more interested in the culture of the fatherland. So it remained really to the free Creoles, the free natives rather, the free coloreds, to make a significant change in the culture of the Danish West Indies. And this was primarily, this was essentially Creole culture, and it was, the Creole culture is a folk culture born in the New World, as opposed to an elite European culture. At Charlotte Amalia in 1790s and early 1800s, all the different free-colored ethnic groups, each with their own Creole culture, quickly blended together and reshaped the somewhat insular culture of Charlotte Amalia into an all-Caribbean Creole culture, which was a big change for St. Thomas, for Charlotte Amalia. It's therefore of interest to establish that at that time of cultural rebirth, there was a sufficiently large number of free native Africans able to contribute significantly to the development of this unique polyethnic Creole culture of Charlotte Amalia, with the first-hand knowledge of several African cultures. It's estimated that in 1790, the free-colored population of Charlotte Amalia was only 350 persons. And according to the 1803 free-colored census that David Knight published, it exploded to 1,521 persons. That's 318 men, 668 women. It's interesting that there were more than 2 women per man. And I suspect that's because the men were at sea, mostly, It was a port. And 535 children. Okay, among these free coloreds, 796 were born in the Danish islands. That's a little more than half. 310 were born in the French islands, 254 in the Dutch islands, and 100 in the British islands. And 60 were born in Africa. That's the point. There's no precision given in 1803 census concerning the exact place of birth of these 63 Africans, beyond the information that 37 were born in Guinea. And at that period, Guinea meant a very large area, essentially the whole of West Africa, going from Senegal to Cameroon. The Moravian missionaries, Oldendorff, who visited St. Thomas and interviewed a lot of the Africans, said that they originated from a great variety of nations in West Africa, within Guinea. And then we learned that later, toward the end of the 18th century, it seems that Africans were also brought from the equatorial Africa, namely the Congo, Gabon, and Angola. Nevertheless, it's generally believed that the majority of Africans brought to the Danish islands came from the Danish African Company forts of Christiansborg and Frederiksborg on the Gulf Coast.
Not the Gulf. The Gold Coast.
Thank you. The Gulf. I didn't make a typo. I just misread. Yeah, this last information I got from Neville Hall's book, which is very detailed.
Dr. Caron?
Yes.
Can I ask a question, please? Why do they call the forts Christiansborg and Frederiksborg in Africa, and they call them Christiansted and Fredrikstad here? Is there any...
Well, I honestly don't know.
I don't either. It just amazed me that they would be called states.
Well, Borg is Berg, isn't it? And fort is fort. Now, I grant you those two Borgs were forts, really.
Yeah, those were.
But I guess they had to distinguish them
Okay.
somehow. So according to the 1803 census, 50% of the free coloreds of Charlotte Amalia were born free. 40% were given their freedom by their masters, and 10% purchased their own freedom. On the other hand, the free native Africans of Charlotte Amalia had all served earlier as slaves. In other words, none in the census came as freemen. They were brought here as captives and served their time as slaves. They served an average of about 20 years. They were freed either through purchasing their own freedom, 11 of the 60 did so, or through manumission by their owners, that's 49 of them. And this was done mostly through wills. Most of the free Africans, that's 53 of them, were freed in the Danish West Indies, and 3 were freed in Guadeloupe, 3 in St. Eustatius, and only 1 on St. Martin. Additionally, 54 out of the 60 of these Africans were brought directly from Africa to St. Thomas. And they had been residing on island for an average time of 29 years. At least 20 years of which was served in bondage. Of the 60 free Africans, native Africans, 14 were men, 46 were women. In all, the 1903 census list, only 27 children for the 46 African women. Of course, they had to be born in St. Thomas or in Charlotte Amalia. The average age was 42 years for the women and 44 years for the men, respectively. Now, this is about 10 years older than for the other free coloreds. In fact, some of the oldest people in Charlotte Amalia were free Africans. There was something special about them. This might explain, the fact that they were older, the women, than the other free colored might explain why the free African women had fewer children living with them than the other free colored women. In fact, 19 Africans were 50 years and older. In those days, 50 years old was pretty old. Of the 60 free Africans residing in Charlotte Amalia in 1803, 33 had only a first name, as was the custom for slaves, and only 26 had European surnames, and possibly Magdalena Oba, O-B-A, might be the only one with an African surname. But that's